Okay, in the next several videos we're going to be learning how to use CSS and a little extra HTML to further style tables that we create. Now, in order to do this, we're going to be using that table.html file that I provided in the folder that I gave to you. So if we take that table and we put it into our browser, you'll see that you get a table that looks like this. So this is actually not a very good looking table. If you select all the text, you'll be able to see the shape of the table. You'll notice that I have many of the things that we've already talked about. I have several rows, I have several columns, I have data in the columns, and I have table headers. Actually most of the things that I've shown you are already here. A couple of things that we've already gone over I'll repeat a little bit, but we're going to take this table right here and we're going to style it so that it looks like this. So this is what we're going to get at the end. This is, of course, a much better looking table. You can see also that as I scroll over it, that each row will light up in a different color as I go. So that's a fairly nice looking table. And at the end, I'm going to show you a little trick so you can do something like this and have a little picture pop up when you scroll over a city name. But let's focus on the table first, of course. So how do we make a table like this from a table like this? Well, the first thing you want to do is that you want to open up that table.html file in your program like Komodo Edit or in Notepad. So as you can see, I've already done most of the things here for you. We have the doc type, the HTML, the head. There's a care set, the other meta. I've also collected the Google fonts that we're going to use. We're going to use Changa 1, Roboto, and Cinzel. Those are going to be our fonts. And we have an empty style area right here. Here we have the body, and we've got the table right there. You can see the table headers right there, and then several table rows with various American cities with their name, their sports teams, famous food, and tourist spots. So I did a little research to put this together. We've got Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, etc., etc., etc. And then we just end it at the bottom by ending the table like that. So the first thing I'd like to do, in order to make it look more like this, is to give us this big title at the top. And this big title right over here is just one big cell that goes across the top. Now, as you recall, we used call span to do that. So that row currently does not exist. So I'm going to do a TR. And once again, you'll be wanting to do the same thing that I'm doing. You can wait until I'm finished with the video, and then you can do it. Or you can pause the video and catch up with me as you're doing it yourself. All right, so now we're going to have just one TR. I'm sorry, one TD, beg your pardon. And that is going to be a call span. And as you recall, we have 4 columns, so that's going to be a call span of 4. And in it, I'm going to put the title, which I have copied so I can paste. What's famous in big United States cities? So that's all you need to do, because that one row is just that one big cell with the call span of 4. And if you do that and save it and go back to our original file over here and reload, this is what you'll get. And you'll see that that one cell, if you select all the text, we don't have a border yet. If you select all the entire table, you'll see that that one cell at the top is spanning over all the columns below. Okay, so we have that. So what are we going to do next? Well, let's try to do some styling. So the first thing we want to do is that we want to give styling to the table itself. So we're going to go into the style area, and we're going to type table. And now we're going to do several things. The first thing you probably want to do is give it a width. So I'm going to give this a width of 800 pixels. There we go. Now, you don't need to give a height. The height will be automatic unless you've got some very special circumstance, but usually you don't put a height. Now, I would like this to be centered in the middle of the page. Now, a table is a block element, therefore we don't need to say display block. Instead, all we need to do is the good old margin auto. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to have it be down from the top a little bit. I don't want it to be just at the very top of the page. I like to have some space, a margin at the top. So I'm going to put a 50 pixel margin at the top and bottom, and then auto for the left and the right. Now, just so we can see it, let me give it a border. So let's say border, and let's say that that'll be 2 pixels. I'm going to make it an outset, and then I'm going to give it a color, which is kind of a light grayish blue. So I'm going to make it BBCC. That's a fairly light color, mostly gray with just a little bit of blue in there. So if I save that and we take a look at the page now, there is my table. Notice that when I give a border to the table, not to the table row or to the table data. Actually, I can't do it to the table row. I can only do it to the table or the table data. If I do it to the table, then it only surrounds the entire table, not the individual cells within. So I'm getting this effect by just doing a Control-A or Command-A on the Macintosh and selecting the whole table. That shows us the structure underneath. But so far, this is what I've done. Made it 800 pixels across. I've given it a centering with a margin. I've given it a margin at the top and bottom. And then I've also given it a border. So that's the beginning of it. Now I'd like to get a little bit fancy, so let's add a box shadow. Now I don't want to get too fancy, I just want to have a very, very slight suggestion of a shadow. So let's try 5 pixels and 5 pixels. That means 5 pixels from the top and 5 pixels from the left. And then a blur of 10 pixels. And let's do the famous old RGBA so that we'll have it be semi-transparent. 0, 0, 0 will create the black color, and then another 0.5 will create the transparency, and that'll make it a little bit less less black. And so there we go. That's a nice looking shadow right there. All right, now let's give it a background color. Remember, when you give a table a background color, basically that gives color to the whole table unless you cover it up with something. If you give a TR a background color, that means all of the cells in a row, only inside the cells, will have that color. The table color will still show up in the borders if you have the borders or the spacing around each table cell. In any case, let's just take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to create a background color. And let's just make this a very, very light color. Let's make it a very light gray. F5, F5, F5. F1, F1, F1 would be slightly darker. F9, F9, F9 would be a little bit lighter. FF, FF, FF would be white, of course. So let's see what that looks like. And reload. And you can just barely see just a little bit of color there, and that's sometimes what you want to do with web pages. You don't necessarily want everything to be incredibly bright and noticeable. Sometimes you want to be very, very subtle in what you're doing. Just a very slight hint or touch of color. Now, let's see. I would like to also put an outline around this. So let's make an outline, and let's make this one 1 pixel, solid, and blue. Now this outline is going to appear outside of the regular border, and there we have it. But I don't just want it to be there. I'd like it to be kind of like spaced out. I'd like to have several pixels of space between the border and the outline, although that kind of looks nice too. But let's create some space in there, and there's a way to do that. And the way to do it is with what's called an outline offset. An outline offset. And the outline offset basically puts a space between the border and the outline. So I'm going to put an outline offset of 5 pixels on here. So the outline and the outline offset. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to reload it, and there we go. So now you can see that the outline is a little bit far away from the border, and it creates an interesting effect because the shadow is coming from the border. The outline is just around that. So it creates an interesting effect where the shadow is kind of half in and half out of that outline. You can change that however you want, but this creates a slight 3D effect, which I think is rather nice. So I'm going to keep that for the time being. All right, so let's just do a few more things before ending this segment of the video. I would like to create a TD. Here, this is in the style again, so whatever I do here, if I type TD, that's going to affect all of the table data cells in the table. And I'm going to give it a border, and that border is going to be 1 pixel wide. It's going to be solid, and that is going to be a certain color. Which color did I have picked out for this? I had it be sharp, BB, BB, BB. So gray and fairly light, not too dark. So I'm going to do that right now, save that and see what it looks like. And now we can see that we've got these borders. Now notice it did not affect the table headers because those are not TDs. Those are TH tags right here with the city name, sports teams, famous food, and tourist spots. So, so that's what it looks like right now. But I don't want these spaces in between these cells, these spaces right here. I would rather have these lines be next to each other. And if you remember from class, there's actually a way to do that. It has to be in the table area. It's something called border collapse, and we choose collapse, just like that. And when you do that, all of the space around each table data cell border will disappear. And now it's all together like that. Now it still doesn't look all that great, but you can see where we're going with this. So I'm going to stop this video right now, and I'm going to pick this up in the next video in this series. So if you haven't done what I've done already, please go ahead and do all of these points, and you might have to review the video and pause in order to remember what to do. So I'll leave the last frame of this video right here, so if you want to freeze it and then just try to do each of these in turn, you can do that.